I opened the purse because it looked familiar, not because I thought I'd find his name inside. It was one of those little things you pick up without thinking. We were leaving the restaurant. A client dinner, semi-formal, polished, fake laughs and carefully chosen words. My wife, Melissa, had joined us at the last minute, as she often did when she knew I'd be dining somewhere with linen napkins and a decent Merlot. She played the charming partner well, a little too well in hindsight, when she excused herself to take a call and didn't return for nearly 20 minutes. No one said anything. Not out loud, anyway. I made a joke about her always being in demand and offered to settle the bill myself. Her purse, a sleek black leather clutch with a small brass buckle, had been left on the back of the chair. She never forgets that purse. I picked it up without thinking, just held it while I shook hands with Peterson and the clients, gave the usual polite waves, and walked out into the cool night air. The purse felt heavier than I expected. Not full, just weighty, like something was in it that didn't belong. I told myself I wasn't going to open it. I really did. I placed it on the passenger seat of the car, and then I just sat there for a while, watching the restaurant lights dim behind the tinted glass. My hands were still on the steering wheel. I wasn't angry. I wasn't suspicious. Just tired. Then I heard her voice in my head. "Oh, don't go snooping in there, babe," she'd say, half laughing. "It's just receipts and lipstick anyway." But it wasn't. Inside, folded neatly and tucked beneath a silk scarf, was a small note on hotel stationery. "Last night was everything. Next time, let's not stop. Room 406. J." I read it twice, once to understand it and once because I didn't want to believe I had. My fingers tightened on the edges of the note. Melissa had never stayed at that hotel. At least not with me. I stared at the words like they might vanish. Like maybe I'd read it wrong, misunderstood something. But there was no mistaking it. This was not a message written for a husband. And she left it in her purse, the purse she brought to a business dinner with my clients. I started laughing. Not loud, not wild, just this dry, brittle sound that didn't feel like me. By the time Melissa walked out of the restaurant, all glossy lips and fake apologies, I was already calm again. Too calm. "Sorry, babe, that was my sister," she said, sliding into the seat. "She's a mess." I nodded. "Everything okay?" She waved a hand. "Oh yeah, you know her. She's dramatic." We drove home in silence. She hummed along to the radio, kicked her shoes off, and tapped at her phone like nothing in the world had changed. Maybe for her it hadn't, but for me something cracked wide open. I didn't confront her. Not that night. I couldn't decide if it was shock or strategy. Instead, I waited, observed, noticed the way she kept checking her phone with that half-smile she used to save for me. Noticed how she started working later, but her laptop never seemed to be open when I walked past her office. The next day, Melissa had an early meeting at her firm. She worked in PR, the kind of job where image was everything and truth was negotiable. I told her I might swing by her office, drop off some files from home that she needed. She kissed my cheek and left in a rush, taking everything with her, except the purse. It was still in the hallway, slumped against the coat rack like it had something left to say. I didn't add anything to the note, didn't write a word. I just slid it back inside where it had been. I folded it tighter, crisper, so that when it was opened again, it would unfold deliberately, unavoidably. Then I called her boss. Well, not her direct boss, someone higher up, a managing partner she was scheduled to meet with that morning as part of a campaign pitch. I used the firm's main line, gave my name, said I was Melissa's husband and had found something of hers she might need for the presentation. He agreed to meet me in the lobby. I drove there slowly, traffic giving me time to reconsider. But I didn't. I walked in, handed him the purse and said, "She might want to check the inside pocket. There's something she forgot that's relevant to today's meeting." He looked puzzled. I smiled. One of those thin, careful smiles that says, "You'll understand soon enough." Then I walked out before anyone could ask another question. It's funny how quiet a day can feel when you've set fire to something and walked away from the smoke. But that was just the beginning. I didn't hear from Melissa that day. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a passive-aggressive text about forgetting her purse or some excuse she'd crafted out of thin air. Nothing. Absolute silence. And for the first time in a long while I felt peace. Not the kind that fills your lungs like ocean air. More like the stillness after a storm, when everything is soaked and broken but quiet. I didn't go to work. I took the day off without notifying anyone, left my phone on the nightstand, and sat out on the back porch with a thermos of coffee that had long gone cold. The dog lay next to me, ears twitching, occasionally glancing up like he expected me to say something. But there wasn't anything to say. Not yet. Around noon, I thought about driving to the firm, parking across the street, watching the building like I was casing it. But that wasn't me. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted the truth to sit there in the room with her, undeniable, in front of the one person who could actually do something about it, her boss. The man who'd vouched for her in rooms I'd never stepped inside. Who praised her in press releases and included her name in company-wide emails. I wanted him to see her the way I had started to. Not the polished version. The one who scribbled notes to her lover on hotel stationery and left them in designer handbags like receipts. I imagined it 100 ways. Him handing the purse to her before the meeting, watching her reaction when she opened it. Maybe she'd freeze. Maybe she'd play dumb, say it wasn't hers. But eventually, she'd read the note, and she'd know exactly who had put it there and why. Still no word from her. The afternoon dragged by. I found myself checking the time like a teenager waiting for a crush to text back. Except I didn't want her to. I wanted the silence to stretch so long it cracked. By 4 o'clock, curiosity got the better of me. I drove downtown, not to the firm, but to the hotel printed at the top of the note, the Fairmont, a high-end place with valet service and gold trim on the awnings. I parked around the corner and walked inside like I belonged there. No one questioned me. The lobby was full of business travelers and out-of-town guests clacking their suitcases across the marble floor. I made my way to the front desk and waited behind a man arguing about parking fees. When it was my turn, I leaned in and said, "Hi, I think my wife might have left something here last night. Room 406? I just wanted to check if anything was turned in." The woman behind the desk smiled politely. "Let me see," she said, typing. "Name on the reservation?" I paused. "James," I said, guessing. "Last name, no idea. I think she was a guest of someone." That's when her face shifted. A tiny flicker of recognition. She looked at the screen again, then back at me. "I'm sorry, I can't share guest details. But if your wife left an item, we haven't had anything turned in from that room." "Sure," I said. "Thanks anyway." As I turned to leave, she called after me. "Sir." I turned back. "I can't confirm names," she said carefully. "But someone matching your description was seen here last night. Around 11 p.m. might be worth asking her directly." That was all she gave me. Just enough to make the room spin. I walked out and stood on the curb, the air heavier now. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Proof? I already had it. Closure? That was still out of reach. But I knew deep down that note was more than a one-time mistake. You don't write something like that after a single misstep. That was history, habit, comfort. Melissa came home late that night, nearly 9:30. She stepped into the house like she was walking into a trap, shoulders stiff, eyes scanning the room. She saw me in the kitchen, washing a dish, like any other night, and for a moment we both played normal. Then she spoke. "You left my purse at my office?" I dried my hands slowly. "No, I gave it to Mr. Hanley in the lobby. I figured he could pass it along." Her jaw tightened. "That was extremely inappropriate." "You're right," I said, meeting her eyes. "So was the note." She didn't deny it. She didn't even flinch. That was the part that cut. No apology. No weak attempt to rewrite the truth. Just silence and then, "I don't think we should talk right now." "Why?" I asked. "Afraid of what you'll say or afraid of what I already know?" She turned, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door softly. Not a slam, just quiet defeat. I stayed in the kitchen another hour, staring at the grain in the wood of the cabinets, wondering how many moments like this had passed between other couples. How many had swallowed betrayal because it was easier than starting over? But I couldn't unsee it, couldn't unfeel it. The note had done what years of suspicion never could. It made everything real. The next morning I packed a bag. Not because I was leaving, but because she was. And I wasn't going to ask. The morning after she didn't apologize, I made coffee the way she liked it, just out of habit. 2 sugars, splash of almond milk, nothing fancy. I poured it into her favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle we got at that ridiculous pottery fair up north, and placed it on the counter. Then I went upstairs, opened the closet, and pulled her suitcase from the back corner. I didn't touch her things yet. I just left it in the center of the room, like punctuation at the end of a sentence neither of us had the courage to say out loud. She didn't come out of the bedroom. Not when the coffee smell hit the hallway. Not when I walked past the door. Not when I knocked once, lightly, and said, "You should pack." Silence. I took the dog for a walk. An extra long one. Just enough time for her to stew or cry, or pretend none of it was happening. We passed the bakery down the street, where the old couple who owned it waved at us like always. I smiled back, and for a second, I wanted to stop and tell them the truth. That everything had cracked open. That my wife had left her dignity in a purse. And a stranger's handwriting was all it took to prove I'd been living in the wrong story for years. But I didn't. You don't unload grief onto people who just wanted to sell you a croissant. When I got back, she was at the table. Fully dressed, hair done, makeup light but precise. She looked like a woman heading to brunch, not a woman who detonated her marriage the night before. She didn't touch the coffee. Her eyes were on me as I walked in, and I could tell she'd rehearsed something. Probably a speech full of deflection, maybe even a tear or two. I didn't give her the stage. "I don't need an explanation," I said, taking off my jacket. "I already read it." "You don't know what it meant," she replied. "No," I said, "but I know what it didn't mean. It didn't mean loyalty. It didn't mean honesty. And it sure as hell didn't mean us." She looked away, lips tightening. "It wasn't serious. Was it supposed to make me feel better? That you lied for fun instead of love?" She stood then, the chair scraping quietly behind her. "I didn't plan it. It just happened. Right?" I said. "Affairs are like weather. They just roll in." She crossed her arms. I was lonely. I stared at her for a long moment. "So was I," I said, my voice low, but I didn't solve it by crawling into someone else's bed. That stopped her. For a breath. Then her face hardened, that steel mask she used in client meetings settling in. "So what, you want me to move out?" "No," I said. "I want you to tell me if there's anything left worth salvaging. And if you can say it without lying." She hesitated, just for a moment. Then she said, "There is. But I think it's buried under a lot of things we never said out loud." I walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the world looked unchanged. Cars still passing, sun warming the sidewalk, kids on scooters zipping past like the planet hadn't shifted underneath us. "You had a choice," I said finally. "And you made it." "I did," she said. "And now I want to make a different one." I didn't know there was a rewind button on betrayal. She exhaled sharply, like she was about to cry, but caught it mid-breath. "If I leave," she said, "are you going to tell everyone?" "No," I said. "I'm not interested in punishing you. I'm interested in healing me." For the first time in years I felt taller. Not because I'd won. There was no winning here. But because I was finally standing up straight, without the weight of her choices dragging me down. "I'll pack," she said quietly. I nodded. I already pulled the suitcase out. An hour later, she came downstairs with 2 bags. The dog sat by the door, watching with eyes that understood too much. She bent down, kissed his head, then looked at me. "I'll stay at Lacey's for now," she said. "Just don't throw everything away. Not yet." I didn't respond, just opened the door and let her walk through it. When the door clicked shut behind her, I stood in the hallway for a long time. My hands trembled, but not from sadness, from something close to relief. The kind you feel when you finally stop pretending. When the lie ends, and the silence afterward is the first real thing you've heard in months. That night, I poured a glass of scotch, sat on the back porch, and stared at the stars. I didn't check her social media. I didn't scroll through our wedding photos. I just sat there and let the silence do its work. Healing doesn't start when someone says sorry. It starts when you stop waiting for them to. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that hums in your ears, reminding you that something's missing. I didn't rush to fill it. I let the space hang there. No TV blaring nonsense I wasn't watching. No clinking of her heels in the hallway. No scent of her shampoo lingering in the bathroom. It was just me, the dog, and the echo of everything that used to be. I kept things in place. Her framed photo on the hallway table. Her coat still hanging on the hook. I didn't erase her. I just stopped pretending she belonged in the picture anymore. On the third day, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Lawrence?" A voice asked, too formal, too clipped. "Speaking. This is Miriam Hanley. I'm David Hanley's wife." There was a pause long enough to make my pulse tick upward. "Okay," I said slowly. "I believe our spouses know each other." I leaned back in my chair. The air shifted. "I believe they do. I found a note," she said, voice steady but brittle, tucked inside a coat pocket. A note signed simply, M. But I recognized the writing from a thank you card she sent us years ago. "That would be Melissa." "Yes," Miriam said. "I thought you should know that your delivery to the office was noticed. David hasn't denied it. He's staying at a hotel. I asked him to leave." I exhaled. "I'm sorry you're going through this." She gave a sharp little laugh. "I'm not calling for sympathy, Mr. Lawrence. I'm calling because I think people like them count on us never speaking." "You might be right. I'm not sure what you're planning to do with all this," she said. "But if you ever feel like putting the pieces together, I have a few of my own. A few too many, it turns out. I'll keep that in mind. Take care of yourself," she said, and hung up. The silence returned, but now it had a new flavor. Clarity. The pieces were aligning. Melissa's work events. Her sudden attachment to late nights. Even the way she dressed lately. Heels higher, perfume stronger, everything tighter, more curated. All of it made sense in retrospect, but it didn't sting the way I expected. Maybe because now the deception wasn't shapeless anymore. It had names. It had timestamps. It had consequences. Later that night, Melissa texted, "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. "About what?" "About us. I need to say some things." "Say them here." "I'd rather do it in person." I didn't answer. The next morning, she was at the door. She didn't knock, just stood there, keys in one hand, a manila folder in the other. I opened the door slowly. She looked different, less polished, makeup-free, hair in a messy bun like she'd just given up halfway through. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. "I didn't come to beg," she said. "I just came to tell the truth." I stepped aside. She walked in like she didn't belong there anymore, which I guess she didn't. She handed me the folder. Inside were printed emails, screenshots, hotel receipts. One from 6 months ago, one from 3, one from last week. "I wanted to show you before someone else did," she said. "Before you found out on your own. I know it's late. Too late, probably." I flipped through the papers, each one a nail in the coffin of our history. "Why now?" "Because I'm tired of lying. To you, to myself, to him." "You think that earns you points?" "No," she said. "I think it's just overdue." She sat on the couch, that same spot she used to curl up in on Sunday mornings, watching documentaries she never finished. "You always deserved better," she said quietly. I stayed standing. "Why him?" She looked up. "Because he saw something in me I thought I'd lost." "That wasn't yours to find," I said. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I didn't move to comfort her. I just stood there and let her sit with it. "I loved you," she whispered. "I believe you," I said. But you loved you more. She nodded. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want you to think I walked away without knowing what I'd done. You didn't walk away, I said. I opened the door. She stood then, wiped her eyes, and looked around like she was memorizing the layout one last time. I'll have someone come by for the rest of my things. Fine. She walked to the door, paused, then turned back. Can I ask you something? I didn't respond, but she took that as a yes. Was there a moment, even one, where you thought maybe we could fix this? I stared at her. Yeah, right before I found the note. She nodded. Fair enough. And then she left. No slamming doors. No final screams. Just the sound of her heels tapping down the front steps and fading into the driveway. I watched her go from the window. Watched until she disappeared into the blur of cars and sidewalks and choices she'd already made long before the truth ever showed up in ink. The house was still. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt alone. But not broken. The weekend came, slow and gray. Rain clung to the windows like it didn't want to leave, and the house echoed with small, useless noises. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock above the mantel, the soft scuff of the dog's nails on the hardwood. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at that folder she'd left behind. As if one more look would reveal something new. Didn't. The dates were there. The hotel names. The time-stamped emails, each one short, too casual, too familiar. She had signed off with things like, "Miss you already?" and "Same place as last time." No shame. No hesitation. They'd made a routine of it. That's what burned most. Not the affair itself, but the ease with which she'd scheduled it into her life. Like dry cleaning or Pilates. I thought about Miriam Hanley, how composed she'd been. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't dramatic. She'd seen the same rot I had, and she'd responded like a surgeon. Firm, efficient, already cutting away the decay. I respected that. I hadn't expected to hear from her again. But Monday morning, I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. Handwritten. On heavy paper that still smelled faintly of lavender. Inside, she thanked me. For not looking the other way. For not pretending. She wrote about how often people cover up infidelity for the sake of appearances, and how sometimes exposure is the kindest cruelty you can offer another person. She also told me something I hadn't known. That her husband, David, had been caught in inappropriate situations before. This wasn't his first lie. It was just the first one someone else had dragged into the light. I read that part 3 times. It didn't make me feel better, but it did make me feel less alone. That afternoon, I took the folder, every receipt, every message, every scrap of proof, and I burned it. Not out of forgiveness, not out of denial, just because I didn't need to carry it anymore. I watched the pages curl and blacken in the old metal fire pit behind the garage. I fed them in one by one, like offerings to a past version of myself who needed closure more than revenge. I didn't tell Melissa. I didn't need her to know. 2 weeks later, she texted again. A different tone this time. Less regret, more nostalgia. Do you ever think about what we had? I stared at the message, reread it twice. I started to type something, then deleted it. I didn't think about what we had anymore. I thought about what I had let go of. I didn't respond. She sent another text the next day. I heard about your dad's surgery. I hope he's okay. That one hit different. My father had been in and out of the hospital, something minor that had gotten complicated. She'd known him since I was 25. We'd spent holidays together. Cooked meals in his old creaky kitchen. She knew his jokes, his stubbornness, his hatred of hospital gowns. I wanted to tell her he was okay. I wanted to let her in, even for a second. But I didn't, because letting someone back in is like letting water into a cracked foundation. Eventually, everything sinks again. Instead, I called my father. We talked for 40 minutes. He was grouchy and recovering, and he asked about Melissa only once. She's still gone, he said. Yeah. He paused. That's probably for the best. And that was that. The days rolled forward. I started cooking again. Simple stuff. roasted chicken, red potatoes, green beans. I started walking farther with the dog. Down by the lake, through the trail behind the school, even past the hotel once, where the doorman gave me a nod like I was just another guest. I wasn't. Not anymore. And then one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the piano. It had been sitting there untouched since the first year of our marriage. Melissa used to beg me to play, but somewhere along the way I'd stopped, like the silence was safer. That night, I sat down and let my fingers remember. It was clumsy at first, hesitant, but the music came back. So did something else, me. A few days later, I got a message from Miriam again. Short and direct. Coffee? I paused. Then typed. Black, no sugar. We met on a Tuesday. Neutral place. Quiet cafe on the west side. The kind with old chairs and local art on the walls. She wore a navy coat and no rings. We didn't talk about our exes. Not much anyway. We talked about books. About our jobs. About dogs and old movies and how sometimes healing doesn't come in grand moments but in simple ones. Like watching someone across the table smile without agenda. She laughed once. Not politely. Really laughed. And I realized how long it had been since I'd heard something like that. Something honest. We didn't plan another meeting. We didn't need to. The next morning I woke up early. The house was still, the air crisp. I made my coffee, scratched the dog behind the ears, and looked out the window toward the road. Not waiting, not hoping, just living. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't what you do to someone who hurt you. It's what you build without them. Thanks for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories that hit home. I'd love to hear your thoughts below.